Have you ever wondered what truly happens when the roar of the battlefield fades and the silence of home becomes the loudest sound? John McMillan stood on the porch of his unassuming suburban home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across his weathered face. His late 40s had etched lines around his eyes, not entirely from age, but from years spent staring into horizons that promised both danger and duty. The scent of freshly cut grass, a stark contrast to the omnipresent dust and gunpowder of his past, felt almost alien. For 2 decades, Mac had been a shadow in the night, a highly trained phantom in the elite ranks of Marine Special Operations. Now the only uniform he wore was a faded t-shirt and cargo shorts, and his most pressing mission was figuring out how to fix a leaky faucet. His mind, however, often drifted back to a different kind of mission, one that had defined his service, and in many ways defined the quiet battles he now fought daily. It was late 2008, deep in the desolate expanse of Helmand province, Afghanistan. The air was thick, not just with heat, but with an oppressive silence that often preceded chaos. Mac's team, callsign Wraith 3 Alpha, was embedded deep behind enemy lines, their objective to extract a vital intelligence asset, a local elder who had risked everything to provide crucial information. The mission was a ghost in the wind, known only to a select few, and failure was not an option. The Humvee's tires crunched over the loose gravel of the makeshift road, the only sound breaking the desert stillness. Inside, the usual banter was hushed, replaced by the rhythmic clicks of weapon checks and the low murmur of final gear inspections. Sergeant First Class Miller, Mac's second-in-command, a man whose easy smile belied a steely resolve, adjusted his comms piece. 2 clicks out, Mac, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the engine's thrum. Eyes open. Mac nodded, his gaze sweeping the featureless landscape. The setting sun painted the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, but to him it was just another canvas for shadows to hide. The objective was a small, isolated compound, a cluster of mud brick buildings that seemed to melt into the arid terrain. As they dismounted, the only sounds were the whisper of the wind, the rustle of their combat fatigues, and the distant, mournful cry of a desert bird. The air was still, heavy with the dust kicked up by their approach, now settling like a fine, gritty blanket over everything. Each man moved with the silent, practiced fluidity of years of training, their movements economical, precise. They were a single, cohesive unit, a well-oiled machine operating on instinct and trust. Mac took point, his night vision goggles sweeping the perimeter. The world resolved into shades of green, revealing the subtle shift in terrain, the glint of something out of place, the faint heat signature of a hidden figure. He signaled to Miller, pointing to a slight rise, a potential overwatch position. Miller acknowledged, his team peeling off like a well-drilled squad. The plan was to secure the outer compound, then exfiltrate the Elder quickly and quietly. Speed and surprise were their greatest weapons. As they breached the outer wall, the silence fractured. A single sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed across the compound, followed by a flurry of shouts. Mac's heart hammered, but his training kicked in. Contact! Northwest wall! He barked into his comms, his voice steady. Miller! Suppressive! Fire! Rodriguez! Cover me! Tracer rounds arced through the dim light, painting fiery trails against the darkening sky. The Elder's safety was paramount. They couldn't risk him in a prolonged firefight. They moved with brutal efficiency. Mac, with Rodriguez covering his back, advanced towards the elders' quarters, dodging incoming fire, their rifles spitting. Controlled bursts. The smell of dust and cordite filled the air, acrid and familiar. He heard Miller's calm, authoritative voice over the comms, directing his team, laying down a curtain of fire that kept the enemy pinned. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, each note played by a skilled hand. Reaching the elder's room, Mac found him huddled in a corner, a thin, frail man, his eyes wide with fear, but also with a flicker of resolve. "Sahib, they know." The elder whispered, his voice trembling. "They came for me." Mac quickly assessed the situation. The immediate threat was contained, but they couldn't linger. "We need to go now," Mac said, pulling the elder gently to his feet. "Can you walk?" The elder nodded, gathering his simple robes. As they moved back towards the extraction point, the enemy seemed to surge. The fight intensified, a desperate scramble to push through the resistance. Mac's team formed a protective cordon around the elder, absorbing the brunt of the assault. Bullets whizzed past, close enough to feel the air disturbed. A grenade landed with a dull thud nearby. "Grenade!" someone yelled. Mac instinctively shoved the elder behind a low wall, shielding him with his own body as the explosion rocked the ground, deafening them. Shrapnel pinged off the wall and his plate carrier. Through the ringing in his ears, Mac heard a groan. It was Miller. "Mac, I'm hit!" His voice strained. Mac spun around, his blood running cold. Miller was clutching his side, a dark stain spreading on his uniform. "Stay with me, Miller," Mac shouted, rushing to his side, even as he kept one eye on the advancing shadows. Rodriguez and another team member provided cover, laying down a relentless stream of fire. Mac applied a tourniquet to Miller's leg, the wound surprisingly deep. He knew they couldn't afford to wait. The extraction vehicle, a Black Hawk, was already inbound, its rotors a distant growing throb in the night. "Miller, can you move?" Mac asked, his voice tight with urgency. Miller grimaced but nodded. "Just need a minute." It became a desperate crawl, dragging Miller and guiding the elder while still returning fire. The helicopter's powerful searchlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the chaotic scene. The door gunners opened fire, their tracers ripping through the enemy positions, providing critical cover. Mac helped hoist Miller into the helicopter, then the elder, before climbing in himself, pulling Rodriguez in behind him. As the Black Hawk lifted off, the desert compound shrinking below them, Mac felt the adrenaline drain from his body, leaving him hollowed out and exhausted. Miller was stabilized, a close call, but he would recover. The elder was safe, and the intelligence secured. It was a tactical victory, but the cost, though not measured in lives that night, was paid in the unseen currency of shared trauma and the heavy weight of responsibility. Mac had done his duty, as he always had. He'd led. His men protected the asset and brought everyone home. But the memory of Miller's strained voice, the sound of the grenade, the desperation in the elder's eyes, those were the images that would replay in his mind for years to come. The homecoming, years later, wasn't a sudden, jarring crash, but a slow, almost imperceptible drift into a new, uncharted territory. When Mac finally retired from the Marines, it was with the quiet dignity of a man who had given his prime to a cause larger than himself. He had seen the world from dusty, dangerous corners, witnessed the extremes of human conflict and courage. Now the view from his suburban porch felt strangely sterile. The vibrant chaos of deployment was replaced by the mundane rhythm of trash days and school buses. His wife, Sarah, had stood by him through every deployment, every late-night call, every tense silence. Their children, Emily and Josh, were teenagers now, almost grown. They had known their father mostly through hurried video calls and the occasional fleeting visits between tours. He expected the transition to be hard, but he hadn't fully grasped the depth of the chasm that had opened between his combat self and his civilian self. The first few months were the hardest. Sleep was a battle. The quiet of the house was punctuated by phantom sounds, a distant explosion, the rustle of unseen movement in the night. He'd wake in a cold sweat, his body tense, mind racing, only to find himself in the familiar comfort of his own bed. Sarah would often find him in the living room at 3 a.m., staring blankly at the television, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. "Can't sleep?" she'd ask softly, her voice filled with a weary understanding. "Just thinking," he'd always reply, though the thoughts were a jumbled, disorienting mess of past and present. Finding purpose was another challenge. In the Marines, his life had been defined by a clear hierarchy, a mission, a team. Every day had a purpose, every action a consequence within a larger strategic framework. Now, the daily grind of civilian life felt fragmented and aimless. He tried a few jobs, security consultant, logistics manager, but none of them stuck. The corporate world, with its cubicles and endless meetings, felt claustrophobic. The stakes too low, the camaraderie superficial. He missed the raw honesty of the battlefield, the absolute dependence on your brothers, the clarity of life and death decisions. Social gatherings were particularly difficult. Friends and family, well-meaning as they were, couldn't bridge the gap. When asked what was it like, he'd offer a vague, sanitized answer, knowing that the true experience was incommunicable. How could he explain the camaraderie forged under fire, the weight of a life in his hands, the silent pacts made in the face of uncertainty? They would nod politely, change the subject, and he would retreat further into himself, feeling more isolated in a crowded room than he ever had in the desolate Afghan desert. His relationship with his children suffered. Emily, fiercely independent, seemed distant, engrossed in her own world of friends and studies. Josh, quieter and more observant, would sometimes ask about his time overseas, but Mac found himself unable to share, worried he'd burden them with the weight of his experiences. He wanted to be the dad they deserved, the one who was fully present, but a part of him still felt tethered to another place, another time. He felt like a ghost in his own home, physically present but emotionally adrift. Sarah was his anchor, but even her patience wore thin at times. She tried to understand, offered support, but the invisible walls he'd built around himself were formidable. Arguments became more frequent, born of frustration and unspoken anxieties. "You're here, Mac, but you're not here," she'd once said, her voice laced with pain. Her words echoed in his mind, a painful truth he couldn't deny. He loved his family fiercely, but felt powerless to bridge the growing divide. One sweltering summer afternoon, months into his retirement, Mac found himself at the local community center, watching a group of teenagers awkwardly trying to learn basketball. He had walked by countless times, but today something drew him in. The coach, a harried-looking man, was struggling to maintain order, his voice strained. Mac watched, a faint sense of recognition stirring within him. The chaos, the need for discipline, the raw potential. It reminded him oddly of a new recruit platoon. He found himself walking onto the court almost without thinking. "Mind if I offer a suggestion, coach?" he asked, his voice rough but calm. The coach, surprised, nodded. Mac watched the kids for a few minutes, observing their movements, their expressions. "You've got some good raw talent here," he said, turning to the coach. "But they're playing as individuals. They need to learn to be a team." He spent the next hour helping the coach, offering simple drills, explaining the importance of communication, positioning, and trust. Principles that applied just as much to a basketball court as they did to a combat zone. He found a rhythm, a purpose in the simple act of guiding and instructing. The kids, initially wary, started to listen, drawn to his quiet authority and the intensity in his eyes. He wasn't yelling, he was teaching. He wasn't commanding, he was leading. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the court, Mac felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: engagement. He looked at the coach, who now had a relieved smile on his face. "Thanks, Marine," the coach said, wiping sweat from his brow. "You really have a way with them." Mac just nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. That evening, he talked to Sarah about it. "It felt right," he admitted, a rare moment of openness. Sarah listened, her eyes softening. "Maybe that's it, Mac. Maybe that's what you need." He started volunteering at the community center, first with the basketball team, then branching out to other programs. He didn't talk about his military service, not directly, but his experiences informed everything he did. He taught the kids about discipline, not through harsh words, but through patience and clear expectations. He instilled in them the value of teamwork, emphasizing how each person's role contributed to the whole, just like a well-oiled unit. He listened, really listened, to their struggles, offering guidance not as a former Marine, but as a mentor who understood the challenges of self-discovery. One afternoon, a particularly restless teenager named Alex, who had a habit of disrupting practice, stormed off the court after a missed shot. Mac followed him. He found Alex kicking at the dirt, frustrated. "It's pointless," Alex muttered. "I'm no good at this." Mac sat down beside him, not saying anything for a moment. He remembered feeling that same profound frustration in Afghanistan when a mission seemed impossible, when the odds were stacked against them. "Everyone feels like that sometimes, Alex," Mac said, his voice low, "feeling like you're not good enough. But what defines you isn't how many times you fall, it's how many times you get back up." He didn't lecture. He simply shared a quiet anecdote about a particularly difficult training exercise where his team had failed repeatedly, felt defeated, but eventually pushed through, learned from their mistakes, and succeeded. He didn't mention the high stakes, just the struggle and the eventual triumph of perseverance. Alex listened, his initial defensiveness slowly replaced by a thoughtful expression. When Mac finished, Alex quietly stood up. "Thanks, Mac," he said, before heading back to the court. It was a small moment, but to Mac, it felt like a profound victory. These small moments of connection began to heal the unseen wounds. He started sleeping better, the night terrors less frequent, replaced by a sense of calm. The quiet of the house no longer felt empty, but peaceful. He began to engage more with Sarah and the kids, sharing anecdotes from his days, not the combat stories, but the funny ones, the ones about the absurdities of military life, the bonds of brotherhood. He found a new sense of purpose in cultivating young minds, in guiding them away from the pitfalls he had witnessed and towards a path of self-belief and contribution. The community center became his new mission, his new team. He saw the potential. in every kid, just as he had once seen it in every recruit. He wasn't saving lives on the battlefield anymore, but he was shaping them, offering a steady hand, a guiding voice, and the quiet strength of a man who had faced true adversity and emerged, if not unscathed, then certainly resilient. He learned that heroism wasn't just in defending a country, it was in building a community, in fostering hope, in guiding the next generation. Years later, Mac, now a fixture at the community center, sat with a small group of teenagers explaining the fundamentals of leadership through a game of chess. His hair was grayer, his lines deeper, but his eyes held a new light, a quiet contentment. He hadn't forgotten the desert dust, the battlefield noises, or the profound moments of camaraderie and trauma. Those memories were a part of him, etched into his very being, but they no longer defined him. He had found a way to weave his past into his present, transforming his experiences into a force for good. He thought of Miller, who was now a successful, small business owner, still carrying the scar from that night, but thriving. He thought of the elder, whose intelligence had saved countless lives, and the impact of that one mission. And he thought of Sarah, his unwavering support, and his children, who now saw him not just as a veteran, but as their father, fully present and whole. The journey had been long, fraught with unseen battles, but he had found his way home, not just to his house, but to himself. He had proven that even after the roar of the battlefield fades, the human spirit, with resilience and purpose, can always find its voice again. If Mac's journey resonates with you, consider sharing this story to honor the resilience of all veterans. Leave a comment below if you know a veteran who inspires you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strength and purpose. Your support helps us share these important narratives.